So I'll move on to George Jagoe. He's our speaker today in this panel. And George, his quote is, "To eradicate malaria is to extirpate the roots of the infection, the parasites from a given population, so that the mosquitoes will find none." And he attributed this to Emilio Pampana in 1963. He's the head of the MMV, which is Medicines for Malaria Ventures. He was at our Melbourne conference 2 years ago. Although he wasn't a speaker, we decided we need to get him up on the stage, and here he is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will be very honest, this is one of the funnest meetings that I ever get to speak at, because the enthusiasm in this room is heartfelt. It comes from, a feeling of a community coming together. So this is very inspiring. Frankly, at a very difficult time. And so I'm a little bit in line with Marcy's message, which is these are very difficult times. We don't want to gloss over the pain. But I do think it's important to keep looking into the things that should give us optimism that we can continue to pursue this thing, which is eradication of malaria in our lifetime. Now, I'm going to start with a slightly dark message, which says, and someone showed this morning, so thanks to Stephanie. But honestly, this slide should make everyone, your blood should run cold, frankly, when you see this, because this is a very worrying slide. And some people would say in the business world, this would be, you showed this and you'd be fired. Or they'd take you out and dump you. Because this is basically a sign of, effectively, no progress for 10 years against targets, which were terribly aggressive. So as that V, that sideways V grows, that basically means the work ahead gets that much harder, because we're not bending the curve. Bending the curve, catching up for the failure of progress is something that gets us out of bed in the morning. It terrifies us, but it also energizes us, because we can't do another 10 years of no progress. Or then we really are talking 2,100, 2,200 for malaria elimination, and none of us signed up for that. You call this an Eradication Congress, good. Let's focus on that in the next few minutes. So, what to be done about this? And so people could say, well, let's first analyze why we haven't progressed in 10 years. And so it's about money in part. Some would say, you know, that was premised on $8 billion a year and we didn't get anywhere close to that. All right, fair enough, money matters. But by the way, money's only going to be getting worse in the coming years. So we can't just say, well, now we know we're really screwed because the money's going to be lower than what we thought. Okay, drug resistance, yes, it has been growing. WHO actioned a plan 3 years ago to deal with that nicely captured spread of artemisinin resistance in Africa. Insecticide resistance, also undermining one of our favorite tools, which is ITNs. So yeah, that's emerged with a vengeance in the last 5-7 years. So it's real. And then of course, COVID-19 also knocked sideways a lot of our control efforts. So stuff happens is the way you could summarize that. What do we do with that knowledge though? So this is when my chief science officer, Tim Wells, and I started digging back in time to something that's now 10 years old. But we worked a lot with this gentleman who unfortunately died in 2015. But Alan McGill had a very crystalline vision around the fact that stuff happens. And so what we loved about the old messages, and the next 3 slides are actually all from Alan's education of us, MMV, and all of the community around how to think of this. What Alan was worried about in 2015, and actually before that, the 3 years before he died, his messaging was, our current control paradigm is a bit like being on a treadmill that's going just as fast as you can run. You think you're going to run faster, but the treadmill keeps up with you. So you're not progressing, you're staying in place. He basically said, our control approaches, while they're good at stopping things from getting worse, we hope, are not going to help us bend the curve. So he also warned us that current control measures would be vulnerable to 2 threats, basically money and biology. So financially, it wouldn't be sustainable to keep doing similar control messages just a little incrementally higher, because you were going to run into constraints on money and resistance would rear its head. He said this 1 year before they started to pick up artemisinin resistance in Africa and before the insecticide resistance problems became much more aggravated. A prophetic statement, in essence. This was his quote. This is him quoting that gentleman from 1963. But the vision around saying, so what does it mean to bend the curve? For McGill, and for the way we think about our work, and I think you'll probably hear Adrian allude to this in vaccine as well, whether it's medicines or vaccines, we have to think about going after not patients, not children alone, not pregnant women alone, but if we were a community, let's pretend this is, you're the community that we're thinking about. Every single one of you is implicated in the eradication, not just by your goodwill, but by you as a human. You're part of the problem, you're part of the solution. If you don't conceive of every single person in a community as being someone you need to target when you're thinking about extirpating the malaria parasite, you will fail. You will fail. Because you all know this very well. Malaria is an unrelenting foe. If you leave a little bit of a crack for it, thank you, it's back. It's not going away. So the notion that you had to make sure there was not a parasite to be found in the community, any mosquito biting anyone would come away with blood, but no parasites to transmit. That's what drove McGill's vision. That's what gets us very excited. So look, this is a slide that quickly recaps that. But basically, if you want to get to malaria eradication, one, the human parasite reservoir has to be ripped out, extirpated, made zero. You have to then stop onward transmission of the gametocyte, the sexual stage. Then you're really talking about being on top of a community that doesn't have a risk of reinfecting or reigniting malaria. So, has this been tried? So, a few reflections. And by the way, this slide is not Zambia's, but in the same time frame that that slide was developed in Mozambique, it was a mass drug administration program that the Gates Foundation, by the way, had helped the Mozambican authorities to do. In parallel, Masepa path, so Todd might remember that if he was definitely in Zambia when this was done. So the Zambians, with Masepa's help and Gates funding, also did a very similar thing. Both countries, between a 3 or 4 year period, went out community-wide, tried to get everyone in the community to take a drug, DHA piperacin, which cleared infections and would help stop reinfection, to see what we could do. And the exciting thing was, you did see, the blue line is what would happen if you didn't do the MDA. That was the cycle of malaria. And those dark red lines towards the bottom showed the kind of suppression you got when you mass administered this drug, DHA piperacin, at month 1 and month 2, took a year off, month 1 and month 2, a year later. So 2 years spread out, 1 to 2 months of administration. It was very powerful. But the reason people kind of put a box around that and said it didn't succeed, well, what it didn't succeed in doing was completely eliminating malaria. So 2 big rounds of MDA and come back a year later. Was there still malaria? 2 more rounds. Was malaria still present? Then you hadn't eliminated, so MDA was a failure. I don't think that's fair, but it is true that it wasn't the single magic bullet. What kind of challenges did MDA show us? Coverage, number 1. You couldn't get 100% of everyone in this room to sign up for lots of reasons. 70% brought you pretty good coverage, brought you pretty good drop in malaria burden, but didn't let you stamp out like a cigarette butt all the malaria in the community. And plus, the post-treatment prevention from reinfection was just about 1.5 months. And you therefore couldn't really interrupt transmission completely. So it was exciting, tantalizing, but not the final magic bullet. And so, wrong direction. And so look, I'm almost on my last slide now before I'm going to create an opening, I hope, for Adrian's discussion on vaccines. These are reasons we believe in the technology space that we can annihilate the human reservoir. Number 1, the vaccine pipeline that's coming up, and Adrian will tell you how R21 and RTSS are but the start of a new generation of vaccines that will not just protect children, as important as that is, but will let you think about protecting the whole communities. And that combined with new drugs, so I'm going to jump to the right side for a second, long-acting drugs that can be administered through injections, can be coupled with things like vaccines, when all of a sudden what you're talking about is months of protection from reinfection and training the human immune system to be ready long-term, not to have to cope with infections. There's also monoclonal antibodies. So these three categories, vaccines, mAbs, monoclonal antibodies, long-acting protection through small molecules. These for us are super exciting building blocks that make us think that the shortcomings of 2015 in Mozambique and Zambia with MDA will be much better addressed when you can come to market with these kind of tools. The last thing I'm just going to quickly point out before I talk about the Rotary, my last slide is, before we get there, there are tools that we need in the meantime. We're not going to be eradicating in 2027, but we do have drugs that are facing drug resistance problems. So MMV's work continues to look at new medicines that will continue to cure malaria, even where we have resistance, and drugs that will help us stop transmission. So as much as I could say by 2030, we'll have all those eradication tools ready, we're not. And again, you'll hear about the vaccine timelines, monoclonals. Our LAI, long-acting injectable, won't be ready by 2030, but we're not going to let the community down with the drugs that we need today to be able to cure and prevent malaria. But look, why am I talking to you all? The reason the Rotarians are exciting for us is because your unique connection to communities is indispensable. Part of what was learned in the 2015-16 campaigns to mass treat communities was the communities had to believe. If you want to get from 70 to 80 to 90 to 100% participation, everyone has to get why they're involved in this effort. And I think Rotary's done such beautiful work in doing exactly that, convincing communities there is a collective effort that they should be part of. So what I would say Rotary's critical role is going to be in the coming decade is, as new tools come available, and as community embrace of those needs to be tapped into to get that pushing the curve downward that we have to do, then hearts and minds in the community are something that you are uniquely positioned to do. Governments can do their role, technology people can do our role, but if communities don't engage and believe, we're not going to get there. You'll have a lot to do with us. Very excited to see this energy to carry forward, but you do play a critical role in educating and exciting and mobilizing communities, so don't drop the ball on that because we're going to need you. Thank you very much.